Hello everybody, this is a really quick demonstration on how to make a shopper bag with expandable sides. So you decide on the width of the side that you would want. To get started, we're going to need a cushion panel. So I've actually got one here that I'm going to be transferring. This is going to be the front of my bag. I've also got a plain panel that's going to be the back of the bag. And then the next thing that you'll need is you need to decide how wide you want the sides of your bag to be. Now, I've chosen about 10 centimetres, but yours can be anything from about 4 upwards. And then we need to cut 3 of these. You need 1 each, so a pair that actually are going to go down either side of the bag. And then you'll need a third one, which is going to be the base. So there are 3 panels. We're also going to need another piece that's going to tidy up the top edge inside. So what I've got here is another strip of my plain fabric, and the measurement is the distance of the front and the back added together, plus the distance of both of the side panels added to that number, and then you subtract all the seam allowances, and that creates your panel. Now, I sometimes add just a little bit on the end just to give myself a little bit of flexibility. Finally, we're going to need some straps, and they come from the white, the non-printed fabric that's down the side of the panels. And the strap is going to end up, whatever distance that you cut the panel, it will end up 1/4 of that width. And that's using the method that I do, which is the way that I'm going to fold it and show you how to do. So we're going to get started with the straps first, and we're going to do those. Now I'm working on my Elna 760. Its stop-start button is actually on the face of the machine, so I'm not working with a foot pedal. You use whatever machine that you would like. And I'm working with about 3.7 stitches per centimetre, so that gives you an idea of how many we've got. Right, so the next thing that I've got is I'm just going to fold over into the middle of this piece of fabric, one side. And I'm going to use the edge of my table to just burnish that fabric so it starts to hold the shape. The next piece you fold in to meet in the middle. So you can see now how we came up with that 1/4 measurement. And so you fold that in, and again, just burnish. And you know, I did say this is quick and easy sewing. It's designed so that you could really sort of put these bags together in very short amount of time. So just again there, just burnishing it, and you can see how it's already holding a chunk of its shape. Another thing that I do is, especially with cotton twills, this works really well, just holding the fabric in place, just taking my thumbnail and just reinforcing that crease line that we've created. Once we've done that, you fold both edges over together like this, so that they're going to meet literally on top of one another, and that is going to go through our sewing machine. So let's pop this in here right now. So I'm just going to lift up the machine, and I am going to be stitching within a couple of millimeters of that edge. So here we go, and we're just going to keep that machine and that stitching going through here. Just going to stop for a second and get hold of the full length and just bring that together and make sure that that's nice and tight. So there we go. And as that's stitching and I'm just talking to you, if you use, when you're looking for guides, use either your base plate, so the actual base plate of the machine, and use that and pick a mark on there for you to be able to stitch, or actually use your foot and pick a point in the foot where the needle's going in and out, and use that as somewhere for you to stitch. I like to be able to move and lean backwards and forwards into my work when I'm working, and just keep the tension on the fabric, not tight, but be in control of it, feeding it through as I'm doing here. And once you're doing that, you'll get a nice, clean, but also really nice straight edge. So I'm not worrying about back tacking at the bottom because this is going to get stitched in a couple of different places. So there you can see I've got a really nice strong strap. Tried to think of the word there. Nice strong strap. Now that's the second one because I have already put one of these together. So there is my first and second. Now I'm going to look at this top panel, and I have already done this piece for you because it's so simple. I've turned over the edge so that this has got one nice neat edge. When I turn this over, again, I didn't use pins and I just burnished on the edge of my table. I was turning over about 1/2 inch or 1 centimetre. I turned it over and I took one stitch line just in from the edge because it was an easy place for me to be able to stitch and use my foot as a guide, my foot on my machine. And then I came back, and the next thing I did was I stitched right up to this edge. So I've just done a little bit of twin needle stitching there just to finish it off and give it a nice look. Now, if you do have an overlock machine, then by all means, please finish off the inside perfectly and use your overlock so that you actually get a good look and finish to the machine. So you would actually be finishing all the edges. Other options are you can zigzag them. If you've got an embroidery machine, there's lots of different variations of blanket stitch. For the purpose of this demonstration, I'm not doing any of that. I am literally going to put the bag together. So the first thing that I'm going to double check is which of my panels is going to sit across the bottom of the bag, and make sure that I've got that right. Okay, so it is this one. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to join them all on. So I need to put one there and I need one there. And I get this ready before I take it to my sewing machine, because then I know that I've got everything in the right place, and you can see by working like this, it's really easy. So I'm going to start off and put one of these panels into the machine itself and get started, but I'm also going to do a little bit, I did a tiny little back stitch that you could see there. Just going to do, again, a bit of back stitching just to reinforce that, and then let's cut that. Okay, so that's one that I've got. Then I'm just going to do the other one. We'll get that panel in place. Just cut these. If you can cut your project as accurately as possible, you will get the best results. So just going backwards and forwards, and do the same there. Let's just cut that, stop that. Okay, oops, doesn't like cutting the thread when we've got our foot up. Right, now we're going to do a little bit of reinforcement. And to keep this nice and strong, I am actually not going to open this seam up, but I'm actually going to stitch it to the middle. So this would be the base. So I'm stitching both sides towards the base. So if I take it from the top, it's smooth, I get to my seam, I'm going to stitch this down, then as I come to the other seam, I'm going to stitch that into the middle, and then we'll have done what we need to do. To do that stitching, I'm actually going to stitch from the right side, because then I can feel that seam and make sure that the seam stays open and I don't get any little mini creases. So just going to go straight across there, but what that will do is give me a nice clean finish, and also it reinforces the bottom and makes it nice and strong. I'll just cut that thread. Let's go in here with the next one. And just cut there. Okay, so let's take a look at this. So there's my inside panel, both of them stitched to the inside, so it's nice and strong and sturdy, and that base is down. Now, if you wanted to, if you're somebody like me and you haven't done any finishing on any of the seams, you could put a second row on there, and it prevents this from fraying, certainly if you're going to be something that you're going to wash. If you're going to be carrying bags of potatoes or anything like that, you like heavy, you have heavy shopping bags, then this is a great little tip to just reinforce that seam just a little bit more. So that's that side done. So I'm just going to continue on the other side and do that second layer of top stitching, because this bag's going to be carrying lots of heavy duty craft supplies. So double stitched, all nice and neat down there, and it's been reinforced so it's really strong and sturdy. So the first panel that I like to work with is the front of the bag, and I'm going to start here using the corner first. So the seam of my corner, this point here, needs to be in that point there. So I'm just going to, let me just use my pins, my snips to show you. So my stitch needs to end up there. So that needs to be stitched in there. And then we're going to do a corner rotation. Now I'm going to start off so I'm going to start off with both seams together. And remember, we need to be there to make that work. So that's where the needle of the machine is going to go in. So once you've got that bit lined up, just get, oops, I've got a little pleat underneath. I'm just going to check that because it moved. There we go. So I'm in there. I'm just going to put my needle down, check it that I'm happy. I'm going to come across the bottom and see where that seam's going to end. Now I'm not quite in the middle, so I'm just going to move that and double check that this is in the middle. So it's still going to go into that corner, but I'm just positioning it a little bit more evenly. That's better. It's only a tiny bit out, but it's always worth double checking and getting that bit of it right. Right, let's get the needle back in. See, yep, happy with that. And I'm going to run straight across the bottom. So, here we go. So, straight across the bottom. Keep the panels together. If you're not sure at any point, stop, take your foot off the pedal, come back into where you're stitching, and just double check that everything's lined up properly, which it is. And you'll see how and I'll show you that in a second, the way that I hold my fabric, because it really helps you when you are working with large, long lengths of fabrics. And some of this stems from when I've been doing things like, I'm just going to take that stitch one more past that seam. When you've been doing lots of things with lots of kinds of curtains and stuff like that. So as this is feeding through my machine, I've got the tension here, and I'm actually then holding it in my fingers, and you start to release it as it feeds through. So I've got to this corner. I now am going to rotate the needle and the corner of the bag, pull out so that it's nice and flat inside, and you've got it nice and neat. And then we are ready to start again, and we can stitch that corner. So I'm going up here, just keeping that with that tension on. And I'm not going to back stitch that piece because I just want to check it, and I'm going to show you what this looks like. So you end up with a corner that looks like this, but when I turn it in, you get that perfect corner. It's got a little bit of dead thread there, but you can see how it's lining up with this corner here, and we've got that double seam that's holding it and supporting the bag. So that's the effect that we want. Okay, I'm going to go back to the other side and just do the same thing. Doesn't matter which way you work, you can work from either direction. Some people find it easier working from the same way all the time. For me, it doesn't. I've done this a few times, so I really don't mind. Get your needle in there and then literally make sure you've got this all lined up nicely. Now, that panel the other side, I had an overlap of probably about 1/4 centimetre. So I'm just checking this one to make sure, because that means one of my panels hadn't been cut perfectly, but this one's is fitting perfectly. So once I've finished, what I'm going to do is just check that other side. So there's the panel over this side. Let's just check that corner's nice and sharp and neat, which it is. So I'm happy with that result. So we're just going to check those and let's see where that comes through. Okay, so that's where I need it to be. Now, it's this panel here that I was talking about that went over. So let's take the back and double check where we need to be here. So I'm going to try this from that corner. So just double checking it. And it is too big. You can see I've got that extra little bit of fabric. So to be accurate, I'm just going to trim that off now. So that's my measuring, wasn't absolutely perfect to start with, and I'm happy with that result. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to stitch across these seams. I'm going to put the back on first, and then I'm going to go across here just to reinforce them. So to put the back on, let's make sure, I'm just going to check my seams here. So I'm making sure I've got my perfect square, and that is what went wrong. It isn't perfect. So we'll get that panel to there. Just going to make sure I've got this around the right way. That's going to fit great. That's a better fit now. I've trimmed that little tiny bit off. Then that to there and there to there. Right, so we can go around this in one go now. So we've got our squares. We know what to do when we get to our corners. We're going to pivot the corner and keep the needle in the fabric, and let's get going. So fabrics together, start at the top. I'm just going to start, then back stitch a couple of stitches and go down here, bringing those fabrics together, making sure that we've got the tension right. Getting ready as I get to that corner to start to pivot the needle. So I'm just going to stop for a second, line up all my fabrics, make sure everything's where it needs to be. And there's my seam just there. So let's go into that stitch, and just the last couple of stitches I'm just going to do by hand until I'm ready to pivot. Pivot. Pull the corner out so that we're not getting it, we don't get any crinkles, and we're good to go again. So as we go along that bottom, I'm just checking it again, pulling the fabric together. I'm just going to stop for a moment, pull out all the fabrics and make sure the seams are all lined up. Hold it in my hands to keep a little bit of tension on, and then off we go. So once we get there towards that bottom, just going to pause for a second, pull my fabrics round so that I make sure I've got no crinkles, get myself so that I can get that needle into that seam. So just going to go there, one stitch further on, oh no, two, there we go, it's good to go. And then we're going to turn again and just line that out. With the needle up, it's easier to pivot the fabric with the foot up. Sorry, I should have said that. Foot up, needle must stay in the fabric, otherwise it will then, you get like little pockets of little pleats, tiny little pleats, and we don't want that to happen. Now, remember, I'm not using any pins here. I did trim that, but I didn't trim it perfectly, but it's pretty good. I'll just do a couple of back stitches there, and we can cut the thread. So let's now turn this the other way. This is the test. So first of all, take your little snips and snip into that corner, because we just want to make sure that the bag turns neatly. The other thing that I do is I do go in and you can reinforce these corners. So backstitch them a couple of times, because that, when you've got a lot of weight in here, that will make the difference and it will help you. So I'm snipping so that I'm releasing this little bit of fabric that I've got here. So make sure you don't snip the bag itself, just release the fabric, and then you can also trim off that triangle. So release the fabric as I've done there, trim off the triangle, and I'm going to do the same. I've released it, I'm just going to trim off that triangle and do the same on this side here. So that's both sides. Let's now go inside, turn the whole thing inside out, and if we've done what we hope we've done, we will have really good corners on our bag, and that is what we're after. So got nice sharp corners there without little pleats, so you can see it's nice and flat and works really, really well. So we've reinforced that stitching, just giving us that extra little bit of support. So just get that thread just there. So there's our bag sides, and we're good to go. You can see that's starting to come together nicely. Now there's a couple of other things that you can do. Because I've taken the base off my machine, I can come into this and I can do some flat stitching and reinforce the seams. And by that, you know how we stitched across here, we can get this under our machine to stitch across the bottom. For the purpose of this, I'm not going to do that because it would take me probably a few minutes, but that is something to consider at home. The other thing to consider is measuring this base and putting yourself a piece of mount board in the bottom, because that can make that much stronger. You can also reinforce with things like fabric stiffeners, etc. But a piece of cardboard's a good idea. Right, when it comes to the top, how are we going to put these handles on? Well, first of all, make sure that you've got everything together. And remember, I said we were going to just stitch over these, so I'm going to do that now. And I'm not just going to stitch over them, but I'm actually going to run it all the way around the top of the machine. So I'm just going to start that and just run this, and it helps stabilise the fabric if it's got any stretch in it. Take your seams at the sides into the side. So not into the middle of the bag, but I'm putting both seams together into the side. And I'm just going to stop there because I've got a seam that's literally has sneaked out and I need that into there. I'm just going to use this to make sure it does that for me. And missed that. No, there we go, that's it. So that's exactly what you don't want to happen, is that the seam goes in different directions. So keep it nice and strong by doing this. Just going to run across there, and that one's there. Okay, so oops, use the, sorry, that little bit of beeping telling me that I've not got the foot down. So we've got seams into the sides, actually then supporting it. So let's go back to these straps. So first of all, line up the seams so I can see where the middle is, and I'm going to fold the bag in half and create myself some notches. So that's the first thing, little notch there on the front and the back. Missed the back, so I'm just going to catch that. And then I'm going to go once more front and back like that and snip our little notches just there, and the same on the other side, just there, and miss the inside one, just snip. Okay, so this bit's easy. So take your straps and we're going to stitch them over the notch like that, so over the top of the notch so that it's held in firmly. I'm going to extend that by about 2 centimetres, and we'll just get all of these stitched in place. So the seam hangs over the edge, backwards and forwards a couple of times, everybody, so that you've got that a little bit of extra support. So do some reversing. Doesn't want to go. There we go. That's it. And then this one is going to go over the other side. Make sure your straps are not twisted, because that can easily happen. So just checking that. That one's fine. And we'll go there. Just going to do that again. Let's go backwards and forwards a couple of times. Stop that, and there. So that's what your straps are going to look like. We'll repeat that on the other side, and that's going to be good to go. So, and then we've only got one last thing to do, and then you've got yourself a lovely big shopping bag. We can put lots in. So and that's that one. And then finally, last one here. And that's done. So there we go. It's really quick and easy to actually make yourself these shopping bags. They're just so quick, and they make great gifts as well. I would just recommend that you do that seam finishing if you've got a machine that will accommodate it. But I didn't want to do that in case all you've got is a straight stitch machine, what we refer to as a lock stitch. Right, I need this to marry up inside, and basically what we're going to do, we're going to stitch this all the way around the inside of the bag so that when it turns, it's lovely and neat inside and all the handles are covered. So I'm going to start at one end, and I'm going to start it so that the overlap of my seam is just somewhere near to the side. So, another quick little tip for you. Fold that edge back, ready, so that we can overlap them rather than having to worry about it being joined up and getting it on there perfectly. So this is a little trick. So just going to start this off here, and just going to line that up. Just take a second, line it up with the top of my design, go in there, and let's start this off. So here we go. Just going to stop that for a second while I get all my fabric all sorted and in position, and off we go again. So it's also really easy to just stitch to this side of that line, because remember when we were stitching we went round it to just reinforce the stitches a little bit. That made it easy for us to work with. So let's continue here. So feeding it, just going to stop that again once more. Check this, going all the way round, and you can trim off any little bits afterwards. We don't have to worry about that at the moment. So okay, there we go. Not worrying about reinforcing my straps, because we did that as part of the first stitching those on, so we know that they're stitched nice and firmly. Let's go again round here, down there. Just going to stop once more, and then I'm looking at what I've got left of my seam, so I can see that that is going to overlap by a little bit, but that's good. We're happy with that. So I'm just going to keep going, and I'll stop and take this out the machine so that you guys can see what I'm going to do with it, and I can explain it easily then for you. So I'm going to get within that part of the stitching, and I'll show you what I'm going to do. So just have a look at this. So if you look at it, I've got this piece has been has been folded back. As I come round here, I've got too much fabric, but I'm going to let those overlap like that, and then I'll come back and just catch the bottom so that this is all level. You can then turn your stitching the other way and just run a couple of stitches up here so it holds it all nice and flat. But this way you don't have to worry about if you've been able to get your perfect circle matching, and look how easily it's gone together, and I don't have to worry about getting that bit right. So let's overlap that, and this time I'm going to go under my machine and just finish off that last little bit, checking that the bottom is level, because that at this point is probably more important than anything else. So here we go again. We'll go, just going to stop for a second because it wanted to fold up, so let's just lift that back a sec, get that back down. I've got one stitch too many in there where it's rolled back, so I'm going to undo it and just pull that stitch out so that I keep it nice and flat. There we go. And it wouldn't have mattered then if I'd had pins or not, because it was the tiniest little pleat that could have happened regardless. I'm just going to reinforce it and take that stitching straight into where I was there, and that's it finished. Now, this is the first time I've done a sewing video, but as I do more of them, I'll get more used to your terminology and what works for you. So please give some feedback of anything else that you'd like to see, because I want to make sure, you can see now how neat that has come. I'm going to just top stitch that. I'd like you to sort of give me some feedback. Tell me how, whether you want me to change the camera angles, you want to change the way I'm talking to you, because I'd like to do more of this, but obviously that'll be dependent on the feedback that we get and what we need to do to make this work for you to be able to see everything clearly. So come on, let's go back. So slow doing our back stitching at the moment. And just stop there and take that stitching out. So while I've got my chance, I'm just going to do a second row there to make it reinforce it. I'll just do a little bit of back stitching. That'll be fine. Back stitch again. And then we're there. Okay, so I've got a little bit to just here, that little bit to trim off. So that's nice and neat, and this will then go inside our bag. One last thing I'd like to do. Now we can either understitch, which means that we stitch from here all the way through, so it won't appear on the front of the bag, or I can roll it and I can stitch all the way through, right through to the front, and that's going to be my preference. So before I do that, I'm just going to pull my fabrics out, make sure that I've got the seam nice and smooth, use my little bit of burnishing to make that happen, just rolling the fabric. You can see here, get that seam properly opened up, and then go round that edge and here. And one of the reasons that I didn't put that seam on one of these seams was that I didn't want to make it too bulky. So let's just get this one, let's roll that one again, and once more, and that is going to be our bag. So I'm just going to pop this under the machine. I'll stop frequently to make sure I've got a roll. I'm going to, if anything, roll it to the inside, not to the outside. Keep the handles out of the way, and once you get this under the machine and some tension, you can put your fingers inside and just make sure that that fabric's rolled perfectly. I'm just going to get myself a nice long length that I can do. Use my fingernails inside, get that nice and flat. I've got there, and off we go. So coming round across the second handle, which is good. Just going to pause for a second to get myself another roll. And just going to get that in, make sure it's nice and flat. And let's start again. Then go. So there, as we come across the next handle, almost all the way round, just this last little bit to go. And please, by all means, if you're a fan of ironing, don't let me stop you. It's just, you know, especially projects like this, clothing, as I've already mentioned, I was always ironing the seams on a piece of clothing. But on a project like this, you can get away with just burnishing. And let's just get that through across that seam. And just one last little bit and take that into there. Okay, so just need to let that down again and lift that up. And there we have our shopper. So let's look inside. So nice and neat inside. That's the effect that we want. Handles really sturdy, reinforced. Sides actually nice and wide, and wow, that's cavernous. I'm going to get loads in there.